Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today we are joined by Dave Feidner, who is a certified EOS implementer. Make sure I got all my letters right. A certified EOS implementer at EOS Worldwide. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hello, Adrian. Thank you for having me.
And Dave, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about EOS Worldwide?
Sure. So me first, I guess I'm a guy who is passionate about helping entrepreneurs. Discovered my purpose in life is to build great companies. Did that while building a network of companies in Europe and Latin America. Grew up to a couple $100 million in revenue and sold it to a big private equity company. That was probably about 15 years, summarized real quick, but they were significant ones. EOS I discovered through my work with entrepreneurs because I bought many companies. I sourced and funded guys to start companies in countries. And I got attracted to the Rockefeller habits, primarily through YPO, and used the tools of the Rockefeller habits with my companies. So later on, after exiting, and continuing to run into entrepreneurs who needed help, I ended up getting a copy of Traction, and I found in it, I would say, the more evolved form of the Rockefeller habits, and it worked for me. And I found that most of the folks that I was running into, that's all they needed. They needed a bit of structure and accountability, and I started to implement EOS with them and joined the EOS community and bought into the ethos of the organization and all the cool people that are within it as part of that community.
Now, for those that may not know, can you share with us what EOS stands for and what it is?
EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it is a means to harmonize and orchestrate all the moving parts of an organization by putting in place a system that ultimately allows, first at the leadership level, those leaders to get really, really good at three things. And those three things are vision, traction, and healthy. Vision, Adrian, just from the standpoint of getting those folks 100% on the same page with where they're taking their company and how they're going to get there. And then the traction part is just using the tools to instill the discipline and accountability. So whatever that vision is, it can actually be realized. And then healthy is just helping them become a healthy, functional, cohesive team, because most of the time the leaders are not.
Right.
And ultimately, as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. Ultimately, through this work with these folks, we get to a point where every single person in the organization is crystal clear on the vision. They're all executing against it with discipline and accountability. You just get an entire organization rowing in the same direction.
Now, the EOS system, I'm curious. So when you go in and start to implement this system, what are some of the pain points that businesses are experiencing that the EOS system is helping them solve? I guess systems in there, I guess it's a little redundant, but that EOS implementation is helping them solve.
Their frustrations?
Yeah. What are some of their pain points?
Well, they usually have a frustration around the big P, people. Sometimes they'll have a frustration around profit, not enough of it. And they'll often have a process frustration, Usually they've hit the ceiling in some fashion, okay? They've gotten to a point where they have to adapt and change, they no longer have a playbook for doing it. Right. So what I do is give them a playbook forever. so that they're able to master the leadership abilities that they need to acquire to be able to hit all the various ceilings that they're going to hit along their way in growing their company and making it a sustainable growth.
And when you go and approach these businesses where you're going to implement EOS, is it sort of a one size fits all situation, or is it something where you sort of have to tailor the program and tailor the system to their individual needs?
Well, you meet them always where they're at, but the tools are the tools. There are 20 tools in the toolkit.
Wow.
There are 5 that are foundational that drive an enormous amount of the outcomes. So because it's a holistic system and it's designed for a specific type of company, a demographic, let's say, of companies between 10 and 250 employees, somewhere in that range would be about where 80% of them land. Because it's designed for individuals and leaders who are open-minded and growth and purpose-driven, then as long as those criteria are met, you can use these tools in any company for any industry to achieve whatever objectives you're trying to achieve. When you get below 10 employees, it starts to become a little trickier because the scale is such they haven't quite hit the big ceilings yet. When you get above 250 employees, often, particularly when you start to get into 500 or 1,000 employees, often there's some level of bureaucracy that's already been put in place that is essentially their system that they've created. And so that as long as you stay within this window, this demographic, pretty much anybody can fit as long as they meet the psychographic.
Now, you mentioned that within EOS, there are 5, you said, foundational tools. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And can you share with us what those are and how you utilize those tools to drive growth and drive performance in a business?
So there's the accountability chart, which is done the very first day I work with them. That's to get the structure of the organization right, so that they've got the right leadership structure, the right structure for the organization to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve over the next 3 months to call it a year.
Right.
We put in place a tool called Rocks, which is a way of prioritizing their top priorities in the organization. We put in place a very structured meeting pulse. At the leadership level, it's known as a level 10 meeting. You might have heard of this. It's probably the most often tool that people refer to within the EOS toolbox. And we put in place a scorecard at the leadership level. So those are the first 4. Those all go in on the very first day that we work with them, because we take a structure first, vision second approach, start getting right people in right seats and getting some level of accountability within the leadership team. And then we're able to progress in later sessions to the 5th tool, which is the VTO, which articulates the vision for the organization.
It's funny that you bring up the level 10 meeting. I remember, within our own organization, we had a meeting, and I saw it on the calendar, level 10 meeting. And I remember thinking, what happened to levels 1 through 9? Where did all the other levels go? I wasn't a part of those meetings.
Oh, yes, you probably were.
I just didn't realize, right?
Yes. Well, when I talk to leaders, and all of my colleagues do the same thing, we ask them, hey, scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate the quality of the meetings that exist in your organization, across the entire organization? How would you rate the quality of the meetings? You know what the answer is? Most of the time? 4.
4?
Yeah, 4.
Whoa.
There is overwhelmingly a level of dissatisfaction with meetings, and it's really driven by human nature. And I could go on in this subject for a long time, but we teach them with that level 10 meeting pulse a means to have a productive meeting. The other tools are tied into it, but you start there with the leadership team. You work first with them, getting those behaviors in place, and then you migrate that discipline down throughout the organization until you get to a point where you have an organization where across the organization, the people are not saying 4. They're saying something closer to a 10.
Now, I was going to say, I won't press you too hard on the matter, but why do you think there is such dissatisfaction with meetings most of the time?
I think it's rooted in human nature. there's an enormous amount of emotional satisfaction that people get from being heard. And without a clear structure for your meeting, you will often have meetings where some people are heard and some people are not heard.
Right.
And some people have deeper needs to be heard, and they will talk and get very satisfied from being able to say whatever it was that they needed to say. But you might not have solved the damn thing through that. So that goes on, and it's just like I've been guilty of it myself. I've run terrible meetings back in the day, and I see it occurring all the time. So I know it's innate in human nature.
Right.
Getting used to doing a level 10 meeting does require a bit of education, a bit of structure, a bit of learning. Once you've mastered it, though, you'll never go back.
Now, I'm curious, when you approach a business to implement these EOS systems, right? Is there a bit of a discovery phase for you on your end where you have to kind of learn what their current operating systems are, what their pain points are, how they're operating so that you can solve those issues? What does the discovery phase look like?
Oh, it's an extensive discovery phase. It takes about 90 minutes to do.
Oh, really?
Yes, I spend 90 minutes with the leadership team of the organization, and that's all the discovery generally that we usually need.
And I guess, do you ever encounter, I'm wondering this as well, do you ever encounter a business or a business owner where they're so set in their ways that you experience some kind of pushback to try and implement the new system? Do you ever run into that?
Pretty much every single one, there's going to be some level of resistance. Yeah, there's going to be resistance because this is going to be different for them in many cases. Now, there is a large community of EOS self-implementers out there. I think right now, in terms of folks who have gone through the process with me, I think the number is 20, or gone through with myself or one of my colleagues, is around 25 or 26,000 companies that we've implemented with. It's 10 times that number who are in the EOS ecosystem. They've self-implemented. They know the tools. They know the books. Those are, in many cases, where, in my case, probably half of my clients were self-implementers. So they were already open to the concept when they came to me. They tried it, they got some traction doing it themselves, and they've reached a point where they need some professional help because their ambition is great and they need a coach.
So can you outline for us some of the challenges that businesses face that would, when implementing EOS, that would cause them to need a professional like you?
The challenges.
I'm sure that's a bit of a loaded question. I apologize.
No, it does come down to, it's usually when they are doing it on their own, there is an element of picking and choosing, I guess. So usually what I run into a situation where they've selected some of the tools to use and they haven't selected the others. So it's not uncommon that they've articulated a vision for the organization. They've got a VTL in place, but they don't have rocks. They don't have a level 10 meeting pulse. They don't have an accountability chart. All right. Or in some cases they have a rocks, but they don't have a clear accountability chart and they don't have a vision. So it's just a matter of, if they're open to it, then you're giving them the entire framework, and you're tying all the pieces together for them and giving them the guidance to move forward.
And can you speak a little bit about the role that organizational culture plays in achieving business goals? And I guess furthermore, how can business leaders sort of cultivate that positive culture?
So there's always a culture that exists, and there's always something that's really good about it. There's some soul, there's some unique, virtuous good in the organization, but it's often been, I guess, covered up a bit because of tolerating people who exist outside of whatever that framework is. So I'm talking about core values. So organizations that are crystal clear on their core values, and they hire on the basis of them, fire on the basis of them, recognize and reward consistently on them will have a culture that's easily understood. It's easily identified. People know what the behaviors are that they have to exhibit to be part of that culture. What the benefit is that they get from doing that is an enormous amount of heavy lifting gets done. So think about a situation where you're the CEO or the leadership team of an organization that's got a couple of hundred employees. There's always some level of uncertainty every single day. The employees have got to make decisions, and you want them to have some level of autonomy and decision making. But with a strong culture, they will make the same kind of decisions that the leadership team would make if they were in that situation. And that's a powerful thing.
Now, in EOS, I'm curious, is EOS something that tracks data and analytics and KPIs as well?
Nope.
And so
we put in place a scorecard for them. Some of them
scorecard.
Yes, we put in place a scorecard at the leadership level, and we teach the discipline around it so that they're able to migrate that down throughout the organization. And ultimately, you get a marketing and sales team that has a scorecard that's appropriate for them. The same thing with your finance team, operations teams, et cetera. Really, what we do is drive a tool set that enables them to get it down to the point where everybody in the organization holds some level of accountability for a data point, for something that they're keeping on track. How they go about storing and managing the data is a matter entirely up to them.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about, you mentioned, they have to have discipline and accountability. Can you speak with us a little bit about the role that discipline and accountability take when, in implementing this EOS system?
Oh, yeah. So think about it as issues raining down upon the organization.
Right.
And where do those fall? Something hits the leadership team level. Here's an issue. All right. What is the root and who owns it? A lot of the dysfunction simply comes from not knowing the answers to those questions. So the tool that we put in place, the very first tool that we put into place is this accountability chart, which looks kind of like an org chart, except it takes a structure first, people second approach. Rather than looking at the organization as it is and painting a picture of that and putting people in the boxes, we instead take an approach where we say, just forget about everybody that's in the organization right now. And by the way, leaders, you're all fired. Okay. We're starting from scratch. Okay. Look at the organization as it is right now. Look at what is in front of you over the next 3, 6 months, a year. What would the structure need to be to accomplish that if you just walked into this situation? Well, we would probably need this function and we would need this function. You start to put that together and you take them through an exercise and you get it to the next level where you're establishing for each of the functional seats exactly what the level of accountability is that's there. Now, we do this pretty quickly in a couple of hours on a focus day, the first day we work together, but it's an evolution. What you're teaching them to do is to recognize that structure will need to change as you move forward, as you add people to the organization, and you need to be an active participant in creating what that structure is. Because it's, usually when I'm walking in, it's structure that needs to be fixed for them to break through the ceiling.
Right. Well, and that kind of goes back to your point about the importance of the clarity of vision amongst all the team members, right? I mean, can you speak a little bit about how that clarity of vision ties back to that?
Yeah. Why are we doing this in the first place?
Right.
What's the big why behind all of this? Without it, it really becomes, it's hard for people to understand why you're asking them to do X. Okay. X seems, X, it could be anything, right? I'm giving direction to a leader, or I'm giving direction to the employee, and the employee is not buying in why that thing is important. The overriding understanding is the vision of the organization. If you can get them to understand that, if you can get them to understand what they truly are a part of, you create the ability for them to get meaning out of their work.
Mm.
And for people to get meaning out of their work, that is a huge affliction in the country. I mean, I would say the vast majority of people go to work every day with a contract of convenience. I'm here to work. I'm getting paid a certain amount of money. I've got a certain amount of benefits. It's convenient for me to get to work, or I've got some kind of a virtual workplace or whatever. The problem is it doesn't take much of an improvement in convenience, if that's your way of thinking, for you to shift and go to another organization. When
Right.
you ground your organization in purpose, people do not leave. They stick around because they're bought into a purpose that's greater than them, and they want to be part of it.
And that's a really interesting, that's a really interesting concept, that concept of, being a part of something that is bigger than yourself, right? And I'm wondering, we talked a little bit about the challenges that some business owners might face in implementing the EOS, but are there, I guess, are there common mistakes that you see business owners making that EOS helps them correct?
Yeah.
Again, a bit of a loaded question, I know. It's kind of a how much time you got question, right?
It's rooted in human behavior.
Hmm.
Visionary leaders of organizations have had success making gut level decisions. And in many cases, it served them quite well. The problem is every gut decision is not going to be a great decision. So decision making that is entirely based upon the visionary's gut instinct is going to run into a point of diminishing returns. So creating a mechanism by which people can get to root issues and resolve issues for the greater good of the organization is what this work is all about.
And we've talked a little bit about EOS. I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. How did you get started as an EOS implementer? What inspired you to become an EOS implementer? And I guess furthermore is how does your background and experience kind of influence your coaching approach?
Well, okay, two questions there, right?
Right.
The first one was how did I get to be an EOS implementer?
Yeah. What inspired you?
Yeah. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've always been. I was basically unemployable. And I discovered that, thankfully, early on. I also found a family company that I could work with that gave me an enormous amount of autonomy. So I grew up in a family company, and ultimately was able to convince them to let me take them global. And then I was ultimately able to join a group of investors and buy that family out and become an owner in the business. So to do what I had to do meant I needed to find entrepreneurs, because I left the US in 1999, so 26 years ago, and I had nothing. I had to go buy a company in the UK. I had to start a company in Germany. I had to start a company in France. I had to start a joint venture down in Brazil. I had a startup in Mexico. So it was literally, I had to find entrepreneurs, or I had to find companies to buy. And I found both. And I loved working with them. And I loved the creative effort of just starting with nothing in a country and building up, and then the cross-pollination from one country to the next, building of shared services, and to support some countries that had not a lot of scale, and others that were much more scaled. I loved it. And when the sale, in my case, it was to the Blackstone Group. We sold to Blackstone, and I stayed on for a while, but I kept doing acquisitions, and there were so many companies that I looked at that some of those folks who I didn't buy were the ones who came knocking, looking for help when they heard that I was no longer with my company. I had left, and that's when that's when the book Traction showed up, and I'm like, okay, this is what these guys need. And actually, I have this teacher DNA in me that's always been there, that was laying dormant. It allowed me to bring that forth.
And I guess, and I guess, I'm wondering, all those experiences of UK, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, all of these things. How does all that culminate in influencing your approach to EOS implementation and coaching today?
I am a bit of a road warrior, so I'm a little different from a lot of my colleagues. We're a much bigger community now. When I started, there was probably about 100 of us, and now there's over 800. So there are, I would say the vast majority are probably working more in their local markets, where I get on a plane, I fly all over the place. And that's just because that's where my network is. And so I travel to see these folks in various countries and other states. It's a little bit arduous for a person who's not a road warrior, but I've done it all my life, so I enjoy doing it.
So in your position, I'm sure that, I mean, all these businesses, all these business leaders that you've helped through the implementation of EOS, when you think back, is there a particular story that really stands out in your mind as being an example of a business that you really saw a transformational growth in as the result of EOS implementation and your coaching?
Oh yeah, there's several of them. There are okay, there's four that come to mind right off the bat, and each of them has a similarity that they were all entrepreneurs who were deeply embedded in their business. So four guys, four different businesses. Each one of them, when I started working with them, I could probably say that as owners, they were sitting in 2 or 3 leadership seats. Each one of those companies today is 5 to 6 times the size of what they were when we started working together. So the multiple in terms of the valuation of the company is considerably greater. And in every case, the individuals have had to navigate some really challenging issues. In several cases, issues that could have put them out of business. In several cases, in one case particularly, it was a partnership. One partner committed suicide. I mean, tragic stuff that they had to go through. But they're all four currently in a place where they are no longer involved in the day-to-day running of their businesses. 2 of the guys have built real estate empires outside of their company. They could never have done that if they had continued to be as deeply involved in the day-to-day running of their business. Right. And literally, it was the freedom of them getting out of the running of the business and putting in place a system that enabled what was ultimately their energy to be literally built into the DNA of the company, in their culture, for them to continue to grow without the and for the owner founder to be able to get the freedom to go do other things.
And what advice would you give to an entrepreneur that is looking to implement EOS in their business?
My advice to them would be to talk to an EOS implementer. Even if they feel that they can do this on their own, and the vast majority feel that they can do that and that's the way the business was built. That's the way Gino created it. He gave it away to the world. Totally support doing that. But have a conversation with an EOS implementer, because in a matter of 90 minutes spent with an EOS implementer, you will be able to understand more specifically how to actually go about doing this work yourself. Whereas if you simply went out and read the books, it's a little harder, and there is a lot of selective learning that goes on that ultimately leads to the outcomes that I often see with self-implementers.
And if anybody out there listening could use your help and could use your guidance and could use the help of the EOS system, how can our listeners get a hold of you? How can they find you?
So they can call me. They can also go to EOS Worldwide, the website, and they'll find me there amongst the EOS implementers, or they can email me directly.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for stopping by and talking with us today. This has been a super informative conversation. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was nice meeting you, Adrian.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Dave, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.